Attorney Perry's going to do the cross, correct?
That's right.
Go ahead, anytime you're ready, Counsel.
Thanks. Doctor, do you have any independent recollection of this autopsy?
Not specifically, no.
You said you've done over 6,000 autopsies,
Yes,
testified over 11,000 times.
yes.
When you were testifying about this autopsy, you were reading it, right? The report?
Not here at the time. You mean, explain for a second.
Just earlier, just right now. As you were describing what the autopsy findings were, you were reading it off the screen.
Yes, I was.
Was any of that from memory?
It was from some of the findings, but I can't say all of it is something I could recall.
Do you recall December 4th, 1998, doing this autopsy?
Yes, I recall doing it just before I left Waukesha County. So I knew it was in December, but I wasn't sure it was December 4th.
It's probably obvious. There's a real need for accuracy in your reports.
Yes,
Testifying over 11,000 times, you would need to rely on those reports.
as closely as we can. Yes,
You need to rely on photos,
yes,
and you have standards in terms of how you do reports,
yes,
how you take photos,
yes, we do.
and accuracy, I assume, is one of those standards.
Yes, it is.
The standards for photography, did you take any of those autopsy photos yourself?
No, I did not. At that time, it was another county, and I let their particular people do the photographs because they stay with that county.
Oh, was it your equipment?
No, it was the sergeant who actually took the photographs.
Was it your camera?
No,
Okay, and this was a film camera?
I can't recall that part.
Okay. Do you recall when you started using digital cameras, if ever?
Not at that particular time. What I recall is using digital in Fresno County. That's the only time I remember using.
Okay, so this is probably a film camera,
Yes, it's a film
and
camera.
you don't even think it was your camera.
I'm sure it wasn't my camera. That's why I said the sergeant had used it.
The external pictures, the external description of Julie Jensen, did you have any autopsy photos of her externally?
I don't have all of the autopsy photographs here, so I can't tell you.
Okay. Did you review your file in this case?
As I reviewed the autopsy report, I did not have autopsy photographs at the time.
Okay. Do you recall ever seeing external autopsy photos?
I don't recall seeing any whatsoever.
Okay. Is it typically a standard that you would document with photos what your findings were as you did them?
Yes, that's a standard that we try to keep. Yes, so I would say yes.
When you were in Waukesha, did you take your own pictures?
Yes, we did. I did.
Did you do that?
Actually, I'm sorry to interrupt you. Actually, we had our investigators take photographs while I was doing the autopsies. So that individual would take it. One of our investigators would take it while I was doing the autopsy.
The medical examiner investigator?
Yes, that's correct. The medical examiner investigator.
And that's somebody who worked for the medical examiner's office?
They work directly with me. They help me do the autopsy. They'll take photographs. It's a combination investigator autopsy technician.
I see. So whenever you were in Waukesha doing this job, you were working with the same person for an autopsy?
There would be 4 or 5 medical examiner investigator autopsy techs. They were a combination job. And so whoever was assigned on a particular day when I was doing autopsies would come in and help me do the autopsies.
Okay. Do you ever
So they're all trained the same way. I'm sorry to interrupt you.
Now, your report indicates that Sergeant Ratsberg of the Pleasant Prairie Police Department took photos in this case.
That's correct.
Had you ever worked with him before?
No, this was the first time.
And was he trained, to your knowledge, to take autopsy photos?
I would say no. I'd
Okay.
say no in this particular case. I was.
And your typical experience with the medical examiner, photographer, investigator, I forget the exact term, would they take external photos at an autopsy?
Yes,
And that's, again, to document all findings.
that's correct.
Okay, so this description of what Julie Jensen's face looked like at the autopsy, you would expect to have a photo of her face at the autopsy.
Yes, I would.
Okay, and you haven't seen that in this case.
I have not seen photographs from the autopsy.
So you have to rely on your report.
I'm relying strictly on my report.
Did you use, was everything at this autopsy Kenosha's equipment?
Yes. Well, no, at the time when I was working in Waukesha, I had my own equipment that I brought down to use. So I would use only the collection specimen containers. I would use those. I would use different, what's the word I want, disposable items that would be part of the autopsy area, but I would bring my own separate instruments that I would use.
And you said I think you said you had an agreement with Kenosha County?
There is an agreement since Kenosha and myself, we were individual medical examiners that work together to provide coverage if one of us would want to take a weekend or go on a vacation. So we cover for each other.
Do you know who the medical examiner in Kenosha County was in 1998?
Maureen Lavin was the person there.
And do you know why you were called down this day to do this?
She was gone for the weekend.
This was on a weekend?
I'm assuming because I know I was covering for her at that time, and I had thought it was the weekend.
Okay, I think December 4th was a Friday. Does that sound? You
I
don't
have
remember?
no way of knowing what day it is. I have no way of knowing if it's the time frame. But she was gone, and she needed coverage.
How long did this autopsy take?
I can't tell you specifically how long it took.
Okay, the report at this on page 1. Do you have it? Do you have the report in front of you?
Yes,
The report indicates date of autopsy 12/4/98, 2:25 p.m. Correct?
that's correct.
Is that when you would have started the autopsy?
Yes,
Okay, not when you would have completed it.
no.
How long did do autopsies typically take?
Depends on the case, but a non-trauma type case generally takes an hour and a half or so, up to 2 hours at the most.
Okay, so on the outside, you would have been done with this by 4:30ish.
4:30 or a little after 4:30, yes.
Okay, on Friday, on December 4th.
Yes.
The report says that Roger Johnson, who's the chief deputy medical examiner for Kenosha County, was present.
Yes.
Chris Hernandez says pathology assistant.
He would be my autopsy tech. Yes, Chris Hernandez.
Okay, Chris Hernandez traveled with you.
Yes, he travels with me to do autopsies. At that time, that was his function.
Okay, Barbara Rossman. What was Barbara Rossman's function?
She was a deputy medical examiner there in Kenosha County.
Did she do autopsies?
I'm not aware of how Maureen Lavin did her work with her investigators, so I can't answer that one.
And then Sergeant Ratsberg.
Yes.
Okay, anyone else?
No, that's all that I recorded as being there at the autopsy.
Okay. Is that pretty typical number of people in an autopsy?
Generally, yes. We have the law enforcement person there. We have the autopsy tech, and we have someone from the representative coroner or medical examiner office.
And when you would make a finding, would you say that out loud?
It depends on the type of case it is. Sometimes I would, if it was a very complicated case, I'd have the deputy medical examiner write something as I said it out loud. Or other times I would take the diagram, stop for a minute, take the diagram and write the notes myself.
Okay. In a case where you were not familiar with the crime scene, would you have been speaking with those at the autopsy about what you were finding?
Yes, I would tell the law enforcement individual what I'm finding is significant in the case.
Okay, so each of these findings that you testified to on direct, you would have been discussing with Mr. Ratsberg, for instance.
I wouldn't necessarily say I would discuss each characteristic because sometimes the findings aren't something I can explain clearly to the law enforcement person, such as petechiae are hard to explain if the individual has never been to an autopsy. So I may not explain petechiae to him because that's something I document in my report and look for further information later.
Okay, well, you had him, was it just luck that he took photos of the heart?
Yes, I tell him to take significant photos. I would say, take a picture of this because it's something medically I need to document.
Okay, so if there was an injury you noted, you would have you would direct a photo to be taken.
Yes.
All right, real quick, guys, we only have 10 minutes left on the Facebook portion of the stream because we can only stream for 8 hours. So if you're on Facebook watching, jump over to YouTube, Never.Stop.Voices.
The role of a forensic
Facebook's going to stop. YouTube will glitch for a second
includes
while the Facebook stream is stopping.
The case, correct?
Yes, it should include an investigative aspect, yes.
It includes considering toxicology reports.
Yes.
Includes witness statements.
Yes.
Scene description.
Yes.
Scene photos.
Yes.
At the time you did this autopsy, you weren't getting any of those, correct?
I didn't have them at the time of the completion of the autopsy. That's why I signed the report as pending further information. So I didn't have them.
At the time you did this report, you didn't consider any witness statements.
I didn't have any witness statements at the time. So yes, I'd have to agree with that.
Yeah, there probably weren't any expert reports to consider.
Not at that time.
No toxicology was returned yet.
None returned at that point.
And
No.
when it was returned, it wasn't returned to you, correct?
That's correct. It went to another doctor. I think went to Dr. Lavin.
Okay. So in this case, although you did the autopsy, you weren't really acting as a forensic pathologist, correct?
No, I was acting as a forensic pathologist to do the autopsy and the chain of custody to give the specimens. And once the specimens are given over to Dr. Lavin and her office, they completed the pending portion of the autopsy report. So we worked in conjunction.
I guess what I meant by that is your role was done on December 4th.
Yes, it was done at that particular point.
And you never had any intention of following through the investigative aspect of being a forensic pathologist in this case.
Well, it became a case that Dr. Lavin wanted to take over. So I gave her the rest of the case.
So that would be that'd be yes then?
Yes, at that particular point, yes.
Okay. Now you were privy to some, I guess, outside information at the time of the autopsy.
Can you explain that for me? I'm not sure what you're,
Well, sure. You understand that it was your understanding that Roger Johnson and Detective Ratsberg were present at the crime scene, correct?
yes.
Okay. And they would have told you what they had seen?
I can't recall at this particular point what they mentioned to me. So I can't answer that question.
Would it have been, would it be surprising to show up to a different county with people who are at the crime scene and have no discussion about any context?
I would say sometimes it's not surprising. Sometimes I don't get any information.
Okay. Do you think that that happened in this case?
I would say no.
That you,
I'd say I got information from these individuals. I just don't know the specifics.
you testified about this case in January of 2008.
That's correct.
Yeah, and I think that's what Mr. Jamboys was referring to when he said something like 9 years later, you saw the toxicology reports and other photos, correct?
Yes. When I came in 2008, I didn't know all the additional aspects of the case.
And it was then that you saw for the first time those photos.
Yes.
Okay, and it was at that in 2008 first time that you saw the toxicology report
Yes, that's also correct.
findings that that Julie Jensen had ethylene glycol in her system.
Yes.
All right, real quick, guys, the Facebook stream is going to end. The YouTube
I wanna be
channel
sure I
link is
understand,
in the chat on
what's
Facebook. Join us over
well,
here.
I guess I should
You
say
probably
this way,
have an hour left.
Post-mortem artifact. Is
So the
that
Facebook stream is going to
finding that
end.
occurs
YouTube will
as a
glitch
result
for
of
a
something
minute.
that happens
Don't go
after
anywhere
death?
on YouTube, guys.
Yes.
Could be an injury.
I'm sorry.
It could be an injury.
It would depend on what the particular finding is.
It might appear to be an injury that you'd see when the person is alive, but actually occurs after they die.
I don't know what you're reading, so I'm not, it depends on the context of what I'm looking at.
I'm just, is that consistent with what a postmortem artifact is? Is that
Sometimes it is.
something that might appear to be an injury, but actually was something that occurred after the person had died?
Yes, that would be an explanation. Yes.
I said that a little clearer that time.
Well, yeah, because there are certain things that we find that are actually around the time of death that we call perimortem injuries instead of postmortem artifact.
Some bruising can be postmortem.
Some bruising can.
You testified about petechiae on direct.
Yes,
And I think you said that petechiae are pinpoint-sized hemorrhages that you can see anywhere in the body.
that's correct.
And petechiae represent the rupture of small blood vessels, correct?
That's correct.
All right. Can be caused by simple injuries.
Explain that again. Go ahead.
Petechiae
I'm
could
sorry, I didn't understand your
Oh,
question.
sure. Petechiae could be caused by simple injuries such as straining.
They can be.
It's just something that would break a blood vessel under the skin.
Yes, they can be. Yes.
Medications can cause petechiae.
It would depend on what we're talking about. Not florid petechiae like we're seeing in this case.
A heart attack can cause petechiae.
Yes, you can see petechiae in a heart attack.
due to pressure, the pressure passes up to a location and it's sufficient enough to rupture smaller blood vessels, correct?
Yes,
That would cause petechiae.
yes, that causes petechiae.
Not getting enough oxygen,
Yes.
difficulty breathing.
Explain difficulty breathing, because that depends upon the mechanism or the pattern in which they have difficulty breathing.
Well, somebody was having, I guess, for instance, if somebody had a lot of fluid in their lungs and they're having a tough time getting any oxygen, could that cause petechiae?
Not generally, no.
No. You talked about any type of asphyxia would cause petechiae.
Yes,
Okay. Just kind of respiratory distress, could that cause petechiae?
it can. In some situations, you may be able to see some petechiae.
Okay. It's not an uncommon finding at autopsies.
It depends on the amount of petechiae that you see and the distribution of petechiae that you see. So when you say it's not uncommon, it depends upon the pattern that you see and the distribution that you see.
Sure. I imagine, if you saw a body completely covered in petechiae, that wouldn't be common.
It's not common, but then you look towards an explanation of how you would get florid petechiae all over.
Now, your report indicates that externally there were very few findings, correct?
That's correct.
There was a small bruise on the front of Julie Jensen's right shin or her right lower leg.
Yes,
That could be consistent with bumping into any number of things.
yes,
The bruises that we saw on her right buttock area,
yes,
that could be consistent with bumping into any number of things.
yes.
Bumping into a table.
That's one way, yes.
You noted a very superficial yellow-brown type abrasion on the right side of the front of her neck.
Yes,
That could be, that could potentially even be post-mortem.
it has the potential. It's hard to know what goes along with that. The color change is very difficult to link post-mortem.
If someone touched her neck handling the body after her death, that might have caused it.
No, not with that color change.
When you testified in 2008, you of course had your report, right?
Yes, I did.
That was 9 years after the autopsy.
Yes,
Today is, I have to do math, but that's 20 some years after the autopsy.
20 years that I can
That was quite a
recall.
bit closer.
Yes,
Um,
22.
24 years.
I'm going to direct council your attention to page 31 of January 7th, 2008,
Thank you, counsel. Page 31.
page 31.
Okay.
Lines 4 through 18. Dr. Chambliss, you were asked, and so it could have been somebody moving her or that was tending to her at the scene, correct? And the answer was, I have no idea. Question, it could have been, right? Answer, I'm not going to say it could be or not. They may not handle her neck area, so I can't say one way or the other.
Objection, Your Honor. I object. This is hearsay and it's not inconsistent with his current testimony.
Well, the part I'm about to read is.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
let's start then with that part. It would be helpful. Go ahead.
I mean, Doctor, you just said that that this would be inconsistent with that I asked you if somebody touched her neck handling the body after her death, that could cause that kind of mark, and you said no, correct?
Yes, that's what I said.
Okay. Question, I guess what I'm getting at is it could be somebody handling her after death. I'm not asking you to say that was the situation, but if somebody touched her neck who was handling the body after her death, that could cause that kind of mark. True? Answer, that may be a scenario that could possibly produce it.
What are we talking about, the abrasion or the coloration change?
About the mark on her neck.
The mark is a fingernail mark is what I'm describing. The coloration, no.
Well, the coloration would just be however a mark is changing colors, correct?
Yes, but that's over time. And what we're talking about generally on postmortem or injuries right around the time when someone's moved, they're quite often purple. Or
The testimony I just read to you, is that incorrect? That
can you repeat back what you just said?
if somebody touched her neck who was handling the body after her death, that could cause that kind of mark. True? Answer, that may be a scenario that could possibly produce it.
Yes, specifically, as I said, the fingernail abrasion could be something that could take place.
That could happen after death.
Yes.
Okay. The autopsy on page 3 notes the injury that you testified to with the pictures of Julie Jensen's ribs. It notes that there's a small amount of hemorrhage involving the soft tissues and muscles attached to the left, second, third, and fourth ribs anteriorly, correct?
Yes.
You were asked on direct if it was consistent with that picture, correct? The picture of her of laying across her arm.
I'm sorry, the scenario, or I'm just a little bit confused about your question. Can you explain your question a little bit?
Sure. You were asked about that injury in combination with the photo of how Julie Jensen was laying in bed, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And you said that could be one explanation.
Yes.
Okay. And you don't know, you of course weren't at the scene.
That's correct.
Okay. And you don't know if that's actually how Julie Jensen was found.
I don't know.
Okay. And you don't know if when she was found, she was moved.
I don't know that either.
Okay. And you don't know if that's how she just normally slept.
No, I don't know that either.
Okay. That's an injury that could be post-mortem artifact.
No,
Which injury is counsel talking about?
About the hemorrhage to the ribs.
no.
You can rule out that it's not post-mortem artifact?
Yes.
And how can you do that?
I've done enough autopsies to know postmortem artifact from an actual injury, and that's an actual injury.
At the same hearing that I just asked you about on January 7th, 2008, and counsel, I'm going to direct your attention to page 37.
Okay, I'm gonna have to, give me a minute, I gotta open that back up then.
Lines 9 through 22.
Page 27?
37.
Page 37, this is page 32.
Sounds like a stall tactic by Jamboy. He's trying to interrupt this.
Question. Under internal examination at page 3 of your report, about halfway down that page, it says, upon reflecting the skin and underlying soft tissues, there's a small amount of hemorrhage involving the soft tissues.
Excuse me, counsel, I can't find, which page are you on? Page?
Page 37.
He's definitely trying to
January
interrupt
7th,
this.
2008.
January, we got the wrong date up there.
He doesn't like where this is going. That's why he's interrupting this. There's some stuff I want to say because I've been taking notes on this. I'm going to talk to you guys when they shut up.
January 7th. Okay, page 37. Counsel, was it page 37?
Yes.
See, this just totally interrupted the entire flow of this questioning. So whether the defense is succeeding in trying to trip this guy up and impeach his testimony or not, Jamboy's getting nervous. He's really trying to interrupt this. So he must think that there's an issue.
Okay, page 37, what line?
That's my thought anyway.
I started reading at line 9.
Yeah, I agree, JB. And I mean, I definitely wouldn't want this dude in my house either. But we gotta ignore the old trial because it doesn't count anymore.
Okay.
We gotta look at the
Thank you,
facts
counsel,
of this
for
case.
Give me time to get to that point.
But I see what you guys are
All right.
saying. I see what you're saying.
I'll start
for sure.
again. Question. Under internal examination at page 3 of your report, about halfway down that page, it says, upon reflecting the skin and underlying soft tissues, there's a small amount of hemorrhage involving the soft tissues and muscles attached to the left second, third, and fourth ribs anteriorly. Answer. That's hemorrhage, not petechiae.
That's hemorrhage.
Right.
I'm sorry. I'm sorry.
No,
I'll listen. I'm sorry.
Yep. And that was your answer in 2008 too. Correcting
Yes,
that
that's
was
correct.
hemorrhage.
Yes.
Okay. Now, same page, counsel, line 21. Actually, line 18. I'll just change that for the 4th time. Line 16. Okay, my mistake. And those would be consistent with postmortem artifacts. Answer. I can't say that's postmortem artifact. Question. Can you rule that out? Answer. I can't say because I didn't examine the muscle microscopically. You need to do that. Question. Right. So you can't rule out that this is just postmortem artifact, right? Because you didn't do all the work. Answer. I agree with that. Yes.
I was agreeing with the fact of doing microscopic on it. That's essentially what I was saying. Yes.
Okay. Thank you.
Yes.
You don't know when that hemorrhage happened.
The time frame, I don't.
That's something. Well, when you were shown the photo of Miss Jensen in her bed, you said that could be one explanation, correct?
That's what I said. Yes.
Another explanation could have been from bumping into a doorway.
Depends on how it takes place, but I can say yes, depends on the circumstances.
Prosecution's going to have to clean this up.
Not a situation of positional asphyxia. You said you could say it is not because the hemorrhage on the rib cage would need to be explained.
In most cases of positional asphyxia, that you even see hemorrhage, those that I've had in adults have been motor vehicle accidents, and that can be explained inside of a vehicle. What you look at is the scenario here, and the scenario on a mattress doesn't explain how you would get this hemorrhage on the front.
Sure. And from this injury, you can't say when the injury even occurred.
No, because I didn't look at it microscopically.
And as you testified in 2008, you can't even rule out postmortem artifact.
I would say it's not postmortem artifact, but I can't tell you the age of this injury. There's a difference.
Did you ever examine after 2008 the muscle microscopically?
No, I did not.
Okay. And was the Dr. Chambliss then incorrect?
What I said is I can't give a specific timing, actually, unless I did it microscopically. I believe that's how I answered that.
No, the answer to that was whether you can't rule out that this is just postmortem artifact because you would need to examine the muscle microscopically, and you didn't do that work.
Well, it's a different answer for me now. I think that it's an injury.
The petechiae around the cardio area
Yes.
you testified to on direct, and it's
Yes.
listed in the report. You called them on direct, you called them asphyxial findings, correct?
Yes.
And then you explained that it was consistent but not diagnostic of asphyxia.
That's correct.
Okay. And that's because the lack of oxygen makes those blood vessels more fragile and they can rupture.
That's how it happens. Yes.
You agree that that's a common finding in autopsies?
No, it's not a common finding.
Is it an uncommon finding?
It's an uncommon finding.
And I talked about the different ways that petechiae could be caused,
Yes.
including a heart attack.
Yes. As I mentioned, the pattern and distribution of petechiae is important, which is not seen like this in a heart attack.
Stress to the respiratory area.
That wouldn't produce this distribution of petechiae.
On direct, you testified about all the things that you gathered and sent off for testing.
I gathered them for Dr. Lavin. She sent them off for testing.
Okay. And that's listed on page 5 of your autopsy report.
That would not be, let's see. I'm sorry, just one second. Just look.
At the bottom.
Yes, the materials that I saved for toxicology were turned over to Dr. Lavin. Yes, I agree. Yep.
Okay. And what you noted in your report is that you saved blood from the heart.
Can I say one thing at this point? Can I interrupt? What's missing from that is gastric contents.
Gastric contents is not mentioned in this report, is it?
It's not mentioned in the materials saved for toxicology.
On direct, you testified that you obtained the gastric contents and you preserved them, correct?
I don't know if I said that on direct. I know it's taken and examined, but I don't know if that's what I said on direct.
Mr. Jamboys asked you if you had collected the gastric contents and that it was to your very high, to your standards of your medical standards.
Yes. Okay. Yes.
Okay. You don't remember doing that though, do you?
Not independently, no.
Yeah, and it's not in your report.
It's not recorded in my report, no.
And these reports, as you explained, are essential to be complete and accurate.
Yes, but there are times where we don't have everything written in our reports.
Okay. Do you have any? You don't have any. And it's important for chain of custody purposes, right?
That's correct.
Yeah, to note how things were collected.
Yes.
Yeah, where they were sent.
Not necessarily where they're sent. If I do the entire case, yes. In this case, I'd say no.
The only reason you think gastric contents were collected in this case is because you've later seen a report about the gastric contents.
That's a fair statement, yes.
If you testified on direct that that you did that you collected it and it was to your medical standards, that's a guess, correct?
No, it's not a guess. It's something that's shown up as a report once I've given the items over to Dr. Lavin. So it's documented by Dr. Lavin.
So it's not essential that you put all these things in a report?
I didn't say it wasn't essential. I said sometimes I make a mistake in a report.
Okay, and that's a mistake in the report.
There was a mistake in my report.
Your report also doesn't indicate collecting any vitreous humor fluid, does it?
No.
Yeah. Are you aware that vitreous humor fluid was indeed collected and tested?
Vitreous humor may be collected either at the time I do the autopsy or at another time. So at the time it's collected depends on whether I did it or someone else did it.
When would the other time have been that samples were taken from Julie Jensen's body?
I can't tell you in their situations here in Kenosha County, so I can't tell you. But you can take vitreous before or after an autopsy.
The report indicates that there were at least 660 milliliters of gastric contents.
Yes,
Okay. And at least, I think, is the word, correct?
yes.
Okay. Would that be because that's closest to the mark of 660?
The containers that we use to collect gastric contents aren't specific to smaller gradations. So you try to, you give what is the mark that you see on the container above that.
Okay. I'm going to ask you to do some basic conversions. A liter is 33.8 fluid ounces, correct?
Yes,
1 liter has 1,000 milliliters.
yes,
So 1,000 milliliters is 33 fluid ounces, correct?
yes,
A liter is 33.8
yes,
fluid ounces, 1,000 milliliters to a liter.
yes.
660 milliliters is 21.78 ounces.
If you say so, I'll just go along with
The
your
state will
calculation.
stipulate that 660 milliliters is approximately 22 ounces.
Thank you, Mr. Jim Boyd.
There were about 22 ounces of stuff in her stomach.
Yes,
You agree that that's a substantial amount?
that's the amount is substantial in her stomach. Yes,
And the report indicates that you could identify food fragments in her stomach.
yes,
I think it specifically notes potato and pepper.
and that's correct.
You're unable to tell from this when the last time Julie Jensen would have eaten prior to death.
That's correct. I can't tell.
Unable to tell how long those 22 ounces might have been sitting in her stomach.
That's also correct.
A stomach not emptying properly for any number of reasons can be called gastroparesis, correct?
That is what the word means. Yes, it could be that particular situation.
Okay. Properly functioning kidneys, one of the purposes is that they eliminate nitrogen wastes from somebody's system, correct?
That's one of the functions. Yes,
And if that doesn't happen, then something called uremia can develop.
yes,
You've seen that.
yes,
And that's the buildup of nitrogen wastes in the body.
yes.
That's something that can cause gastroparesis.
I don't know if that causes gastroparesis. I'll just put it that way. I'm not a clinician to know that.
Okay. Are you familiar with that? Do you know that renal dysfunction would affect somebody's electrolyte levels,
Yes,
the acid base levels in her system?
yes,
Okay. An electrolyte acid base, something affecting her electrolyte status can also affect GI motility, correct?
and that's correct.
Okay. And that's GI motility is another way of saying, well, it could cause gastroparesis.
Yes,
It depends also on what is in those gastric contents.
yes, it's also important.
Because what's in the gastric contents can slow down metabolism or the breakdown of tissues, correct?
That's correct.
And you don't have or have you seen, I'll just ask it this way, have you seen a report identifying everything that was in those gastric contents?
Explain what you mean, everything that's in the gastric contents.
Well, you visually identified potato and pepper.
Yes, I didn't see anything that I would venture to clearly point out in the gastric contents. So I guess you're correct. I didn't see a report of that.
And you have seen a report that said that there was some amount of ethylene glycol.
Yes,
And I'm asking if you're able to, from the reports you've seen, account for all 22 ounces of what's in her stomach.
no,
And you would need to know that in order to opine whether or not her metabolism was slowed down by the contents of her stomach.
yes,
Because if there's a toxin, it would depend on the toxin.
it depends on the toxin and also depends on how the toxin binds to the material in the stomach. There are multiple particular ways that the toxin binds.
Some things get absorbed through the intestinal lining, correct?
Well, in the stomach, it can be in the liquid, it can be in the mucus, it can bind to the hydrochloride, it can bind the protein. So you can have 4 different ways that it could be, at least.
Could you say that again? I didn't really understand. It can bind?
The drug, when it goes into your stomach, it's taken up in different ways as it's in your stomach. And that's why you can't inject gastric contents right into a gas chromatography. You got to extract the drug.
So the way something might get absorbed in a body from the gastric contents would depend on really what those gastric contents were.
It depends on the gastric contents and the type of drug that it is. If it's the type that can be absorbed readily or is not absorbed readily.
And of course, it would depend on what's happening with GI motility in general.
That's true.
And something would, of course, have to come in contact with a stomach lining to be absorbed that way.
Yes, yes.
Okay. You're familiar with the phases of ethylene glycol poisoning?
No, I'm not.
Not at all?
Not at all.
Were you at one time?
No, I'm not. I wasn't at one time.
Wouldn't be able to testify at all about,
No, I would not.
okay, so
Not
if-
about ethylene glycol. I'm not an expert or even very comfortable going through the different pharmacokinetics of ethylene glycol.
So if you testified in 2008 about the phases of ethylene glycol, do you wish you hadn't?
I wish I had.
Oh, I told you guys he was key during the 2008 trial. This is big. This is major, guys. Prosecution is going to have to clean this up. This is a problem. Defense is going hard to impeach this witness.
You noted that her urinary bladder was distended with 150 cc's of urine.
Yes.
Are you able to tell from that when the last time it was that Julie Jensen urinated?
No, I cannot tell.
Do you have any idea of when the last time she would have urinated?
No, I could not tell. No.
Could it have been more than a day?
There's no way for me to know when she last urinated, so I can't speculate on it.
You are aware, you testified that there were oxalic acid crystals in the kidneys, correct?
Yes,
And that in her kidneys would affect her kidney functions.
that's correct.
One of the things that can happen with oxalic acid crystals in the kidney is that you can go into acute renal failure.
That's correct.
You didn't receive any information about urine in the bed?
I'm sorry, I didn't.
Did you receive any information in this case about there being urine in the bed?
No, I did not.
Any on her clothes?
No, not when I saw him, but I didn't receive any information about it
Weren't
either.
on the clothes that you saw,
No,
and no one told you anything otherwise?
no one told me anything otherwise.
Do you remember sending or directing Detective Ratsberg to go and collect or look for fluids at the scene?
I don't recall any of that. That's too long ago. I just don't recall.
Okay. So if that happened or didn't happen, you're just not aware of it.
I just can't say. I mean, it's 20 years ago. I really can't say.
In terms of Julie Jensen's functions on the day that she died and what she was able to do, are you able to say at all?
Not clearly. I'd be speculating. So I
Because
have
it
no
involves ethylene glycol poisoning?
It's not only ethylene glycol. She also has multiple other drugs in her system. So it's hard to say.
Okay. You don't know if she could get up and walk around.
I have no way of knowing.
And like you just said, you don't know if she could urinate.
That's also true.
We know she had food in her stomach.
I know she has food in her stomach.
You have no idea when that food got in her stomach.
Don't know.
And is, just so I'm clear, one of the reasons you can't say is because of kind of your limited knowledge about the effects ethylene glycol has on a human body?
It's ethylene glycol primarily, but we also have other drugs in her system. So it's a drug environment which is difficult to predict function. I would just put it that way in a general way.
And after this case, you did no additional research.
No, I did not.
Have you done any other reports in this case?
No, I have not.
So in 1998, your autopsy concluded with, it says cause of death, and it says pending further studies.
Yes, that's a preliminary type autopsy report when you put pending there. Yes.
And then in 2008, while testifying, you were given basically the same hypothetical that Mr. Jamboys just gave you today, correct?
I can't remember specifically what you're describing there. Can you explain for me?
Sure. You were given the hypothetical about if Mr. Jensen had confessed and then the description of asphyxiation. Do you remember that?
Yes, I recall that part about asphyxiation. Yes.
Okay. And based on that, you opined as to cause and manner of death, correct?
Yes, I did.
Okay. Credibility of witnesses matters to a forensic pathologist, doesn't it?
Yes.
You don't know anything about the source of that information, do you?
Explain what you mean. I don't know what your question is referring
You
to.
don't know anything about the credibility of whatever witness would have claimed that Mark Jensen made that confession.
No, I don't.
And if you learned that that person was completely incredible, you wouldn't be able to rely on that statement, would you?
I rely upon the, I guess, the investigators in the case and what they feel, how strongly they feel about the case, because I don't do that investigation. So
So do
I'd
you-
have to rely upon what they are and what their relationship has been with me as the investigator, forensic pathologist. That's the best way I can describe it.
So do you rely on the credibility of witnesses?
Again, that goes back to the investigator. I don't personally do the investigation. So it's not me determining whether they're credible or not.
I see.
I have to rely upon them.
So whatever the investigator tells you the scenario is, that's credible?
No, what I'm saying is I have to, when I'm discussing the case with them, feel that my autopsy findings are consistent with what the story is that they're telling me.
I want to be clear, I understand your testimony. If you assume that the person providing the information about Mark Jensen is a liar, does that affect your determination of cause of death?
No, as I answered before, it goes to the investigator who presents the information to me, and what that material he presents in association with my autopsy findings. I can't go back and determine credibility of their witnesses. That's up to the law enforcement person. I can only do the autopsy findings.
I'm sorry. I'm going to, counsel, I'm going to direct your attention. I'm looking at, again, January 7th, 2008.
Yes, counsel, which page are you looking at?
Page 74. '73 to '74, the bottom of '73. Starting at line 25 on page 73.
I'm almost there, counsel. Okay. Page 73, line. Which line?
25.
Yes, okay, line 25.
Yeah, you were asked, Doctor, now if in that hypothetical you assume that the person providing the information about Mark Jensen is a liar, then do you have an opinion to a reasonable degree of medical certainty? Answer, yes. Question, and what is that? Answer, it's undetermined.
Yes, at that particular point.
You agree with that?
It depends on what the whole context of what you just read in that little bit. It's hard for me to know what the whole context is.
Sure. The person who reported that Mark Jensen confessed, if that person is a liar, then do you have a cause of death?
Just the way you described that, nothing about the investigator, nothing about anything else. It would have to be undetermined because I don't have any additional findings to go along with the investigation.
Do you recall meeting with Detective Ratsburg and Dr. Lavin in March of 1999?
I remember meeting with them. I don't know the particular date though.
Okay, that's fine. So you did the autopsy on December 4th, 1998.
Yes,
Okay. And then maybe a few months after that, you remember meeting with them?
I can't tell you, but I just remembered I met with them.
You remember a subsequent meeting that
Yes.
included Detective Ratsburg and Maureen Lavin.
Yes,
Do you have notes about that meeting was?
I'm sorry?
Do you have notes or memory about what you discussed?
No, I don't.
Can you tell from your autopsy report what date you completed it?
No,
Would this report have been sent that same day?
this report that I have produced, not the same day, no.
Okay. How long would it have taken you to do?
Depends on my caseload in conjunction with their caseload. It may have taken me months and months considering it's not my particular jurisdiction.
If there's information in the record that suggested it was faxed on February 4th, 1999, would that be consistent?
I can't tell you that. There's no way for me to know.
I need just a moment.
Go ahead.
All right, comment in the chat. Put a number 1 if you think the defense destroyed this witness, or a number 2 in the chat if you think this witness is still a strong witness for the prosecution. He was a key witness in the 2008 conviction of Mark Jensen. Put a 1 if the defense has just annihilated his credibility,
I do have one more question, Doctor.
or a 2 if
When you were looking at
prosecution
the
is still
scene
valid.
photo of Julie Jensen lying on her bed, and maybe I've already asked this and just forgot it, you testified that that she was on a soft mattress.
Yes,
Where did you get
on a soft material, which is a mattress,
just on a mattress?
on a mattress.
Cross.
Doctor, you have no idea when Julie Jensen was, you have no idea when Julie Jensen was put in that position.
Yes, I think I answered that as well. Yes,
You agree that you
Yes.
don't have any idea?
yes.
And that she may have been moved after first responders got there?
Yes.
Were there any bruises on Julie Jensen's back?
No.
Any marks consistent with being sat on her back?
That's not uncommon to see nothing when someone's pressure, so there's no marks there at all.
Bruising on her arms in terms of being rotated around and pushed down?
There's no bruising on her arms by that manner.
That hypothetical that Mr. Jamboys gave you, it assumes that that is precisely how Julie Jensen's body was at the time of her death, doesn't it?
Yes, it does.
Okay. And you have no idea how long she was in that position.
No, I do not.